A Winnebago County court case sets a legal standard in the state of Illinois, one that attorneys say protects survivors of abuse and sends a powerful message to those who commit the crime.
The case involves a woman who says the person who she was in a relationship with shared a sexually explicit video meant to be private on a public website. WIFR reporter Sydney Stoffregan talks with the attorney who handled the case. He says this decision provides hope for survivors.
In 2021, a woman went to Prairie State Legal Services seeking help with an order of protection that had previously been denied. It took three more years for the case to finally be decided.
That the law is there to support them.
In 2021, a woman known as Jane Doe claimed a former boyfriend shared private videos of her online without her consent. Her name and personal details also appeared on the website. After a criminal case failed to move forward, she decided to try civil action and contacted Prairie State Legal Services attorney Jesse Hodiern. The court sided with her, and an appellate court upheld the ruling. Hodiern says this creates a possible roadmap for future cases.
To serve as a deterrent from people who would threaten to disseminate private images or to actually do it, that they understand that the law is there to protect from this kind of conduct.
Jimmy Getter with Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling says cyber exploitation is more prevalent than ever. She believes when online sexual abuse happens, victims often feel too ashamed to speak up, but this case could inspire courage.
We want healing, we want hope, we want all of that for survivors, and we want persons who are doing these things, we want them held accountable, but we also want them also to heal, to learn, and to interrupt that vicious cycle.
The win came because of the Civil Remedies for Non-Consensual Dissemination of Private Images Act. Hodiern says the court granted Jane Doe $300,000 and ordered the removal of the videos.
Very important for people who have suffered harm under the statute is to get a court order that the image is actually destroyed and gone forever as much as possible.
Prairie State Legal Services explains that the video of Jane Doe was allegedly posted as retaliation for the plaintiff ending the relationship. They hope that this case will stop would-be abusers in their tracks.
Thank you, Sydney. And Rockford Sexual Assault Counseling wants survivors of cyber sexual abuse to know they are not to blame for what has happened to them and encourages them to reach out to someone they trust or seek professional therapy.